All right, we're recording. I'm excited to have Mr. Kamal Moo today. Kamal is the author of the book that we've been using for class all semester long, the straightforward guide to the music business, with all my food smudges on the cover. And we're excited to have you here, Kamal. We've really taken a deep dive into your book this semester, and I know you've been on the podcast before, so really excited to have you here and spend an hour with us and share some info and insight.
Cool. No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And everyone that's here, I'll just ask an opening question or two to kind of break the ice, and then I'll let everyone else ask questions. But either if there's a lot of people unmuting mics, just keep an eye on the mics, but maybe use the raise hand feature, and then I'll just call on you guys to ask your questions. But to get started, Kamal, tell everybody a little bit about you and what the life of an entertainment attorney in LA looks like.
Yeah. So I actually got into music business as a manager. So I went to USC for undergrad, music industry major, and then I went to law school in Southwestern Law School here in LA. Which is they have a really heavy entertainment program there. They have an entertainment institute. So I passed the bar in 2006, and then really I worked for a venture capital firm for like a year, and then that company went out of business, and then my brother's band just ended up getting offered a record deal. They just had a huge song on MySpace, um, back when MySpace was still around, really, or a thing. But they were like getting like 50,000 plays a day because they did like a screamo rock cover of a hip hop song. And so then I started managing them, and they got a record deal, and then we did the album and went on tour. And so I did that for a few years. I managed a few bands, and that was really interesting and fun. In 2010, I started my law practice with a partner, and then my partner, he actually left law altogether in 2013. So then I went solo. So I've been practicing law like kind of full time since about 2010. And so yeah, now I've just been building my practice. I represent Janet Jackson. She's my main client. Do some work with the Hallmark Channel. I do some of the licensing deals. Work with a lot of independent record labels and independent artists and songwriters and producers. I represent a bunch of A&R people who work at major record labels, but they also manage on the side. So I do their kind of management stuff as well. So yeah, just a lot of music. Like 90% of what I do is music law, and that's why I wrote the book, because I have a lot of just real world experience.
I love it. I love it. When someone reaches out to you, what does that initial, I guess, conversation look like, and why do people tend to reach out to you? Um, we'll start there, and then maybe make a little bit of loaded questions. When do people typically reach out to you, and when should they be reaching out to you?
Most of the time, they reach out to me because they have a contract
Mhm.
they need reviewed, and that's the best time to reach out, honestly. I mean, because if you have a contract on the table, you definitely want a good lawyer to look at it, someone who knows what they're talking about. Don't go to your cousin who's like a personal injury lawyer. Go to someone who knows, about the music business. And yeah, that's usually they reach out to me, and then I'll usually just give them a quote to review it if they want me to, or if they want me to negotiate it, then I'll usually require a retainer for that. So it really depends on the situation.
Mhm. What one of the first things I want to ask you, and then we'll open it up to everyone. And I have a bunch of other questions in case people get shy. But um, the 7 year rule that you have in your book, that's the first time I heard about that. And there
Yep.
currently also is a bill in California, the Free Artists from Industry Restrictions Act. I guess where they're trying to make changes to that statute in California. What is the year rule, and what do you know about this new bill that they're trying to pass?
So the 7-year rule in California is basically so it's a law that says that no personal services contract, exclusive personal services contract, can last more than 7 years, which means like a record contract is a personal services contract. So after 7 years, you can terminate and get out of it. Now it's not a get out of jail free card. Because basically they can still sue you for damages even if you break the contract. So here, for example, the example I give in the book is basically, you have, let's say there's a guy who records an album, and he's got 5 years left on his contract. The record label requests a second album, but he just never finishes it. He keeps on recording and recording and recording. Then the 7 years comes around, and he says, well, I just want to get out of this contract. I'm going to terminate under the 7-year rule. I mean, he could do that, but at the same time, he's going to be on the hook for all that money the label spent, because they spent millions of dollars perhaps recording that second album that never came out or never got delivered. So it's, yeah, he lets you get out of the contract, but that doesn't mean you're kind of, out of the woods. You're going to have to
Mhm.
deal with, if the label wants to get their money back, you have to figure something out there. To your point, I don't know much about the amendment to that, so I can't really speak to it.
Okay.
But California is always trying to, do something there in that area.
Sure. If someone is in between albums, like in between album cycle, and they haven't like really started recording the next album yet, and it's been 7 years, is that a loophole to get out? If I mean, I guess it depends if the previous record was recouped or not, but is that kind of a loophole to get out before you go into the studio for the next album?
I mean, yeah, you could use a 7-year rule. Realistically, I mean, just in my experience, you're going to want to try and negotiate some kind of termination with a label. You're going to want
Mhm.
to have just something in writing that they understand. And a lot of labels, the major labels especially, they understand too. If you're really unhappy on their label, they're not going to keep you around. I mean, it's like, what's the point of that? I mean, granted, it happens sometimes, but it's not a common issue. I feel like they'll usually let you go and say, okay, just give us an override, which is like some royalty from your future projects for the next project and give it to us, like 5% or whatever. And then you negotiate a termination, and then you, you negotiate the override for the previous label, and then you just kind of move on. Because having an artist on your label who's just really not happy is not really, conducive to anybody's, success. So that's
Exactly.
why I think it's better just to kind of negotiate a termination at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Does anybody have any questions? Chris, Fatima, Milena, Paul, open up to you all. Don't be shy.
I'll jump in. We've been talking in class about when is the good time to talk to a lawyer, and I guess most of the time it happens when there's a piece of paper, when there's a contract. But we've also been talking about doing it before then. And I'm just wondering, Kamal, if you have had people approach you before they get to that point of a contract and say, I'm in the business, I'm thinking of going that way, or I don't know if I will, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll get to a point of a contract, but I want to meet some lawyers first. Have you ever had that happen? And do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, some people have reached out to me ahead of time, just because they're trying to structure, or even they're trying to get their own project together. Say, okay, I'm putting out an album. What do I need to do? Like, what do I to cover my bases? And that's not bad. I mean, I'll do a consultation and say, well, here's some of the things you need. I'm around if you want me to help you with it. But I'll always talk to them, just give them at least that free initial consultation to kind of give them the rundown of what they should be looking at, what they should be thinking of, and just sort of give some guidance. And that's one reason I wrote the book too, because I got a lot of the same questions over and over again. It's like a lot of the same stuff regarding copyright and contracts. I'm like, let me just write a book on this, because I've answered these questions like hundreds of times at this point. So when I wrote this book, I wrote it like really quickly, because it was just, I sort of had all these answers in my head because I just had talked about them so much. That's one thing I recommend when someone reaches out to me, and just for information, like you're saying, I say, well, you might want to check out my book. It's only like $15. It's going to give you a lot of information. Then maybe then at least we can have a better conversation, because they'll have sort of like a baseline of knowledge to work from. And, that's always helpful.
Ask a quick follow-up question to that. Back in the day, artists would find, or an artist and their manager would find attorneys to add to the team, because attorneys would sometimes open some doors, like they would open a door to a record label or a publishing company. Is that something still happening these days, or is it mostly the artist and the management team doing all the legwork on that?
It's mostly the artist and the manager. However, because I never promised my clients I can do that for them. But in the past, I have seen opportunities where I say, hey, you guys should talk to each other and see what's possible. It actually happened not too long ago. I have a producer client who, he's got a bunch of different businesses, but he loves producing, and he had money to like produce. And then I also had a singer who has a really big following online. And he was looking for someone to develop, and she was looking for a producer, and I just put them together, and they've actually put out a song recently. And it's a really good song. I think it's really, hopefully it does well. But it's one of those things that like, I don't promise it, but if I see the opportunities that make sense, I'll put people together. A lot of it is just, you don't want to put your name behind somebody and recommend somebody if it's not going to work out, or they're kind of difficult to work with, because then you're going to get a bad reputation. So that's why, I'm pretty wary about doing it. I don't really just send anybody over to a record label, or like introduce just anybody to anybody else. It has to make sense to be, like it doesn't make me look bad, basically.
Yeah, that completely makes sense, because you want to protect your relationships too, and you want people to answer the phone or reply to an email when you reach out.
Right, because if I just keep on sending people a bunch of difficult, people to work with, it's like they're not going to really want to hear what I have to say anymore. So yeah. So I'm really, so I'll do it, but it's not common.
Yeah. Anybody? Any questions?
Hey, Chris and Kamal, yeah, I got one.
Go for it.
Yeah, I've had a couple instances. One as when I first tried doing the promoter thing back in the mid 2000s, and again recently with this a documentary I'm working on, and that is I'm wondering if non-disclosure agreements get used in the industry because in my case, I had a venue that I approached and I told them the artists I wanted to play there. They turned me down, but then they brought in the artists in. And with my documentary, I pitched an idea to someone I wanted to shoot a particular scene with. And they ended up doing that on their own without my involvement. So
Right.
on non-disclosure agreements used, is that something I could try, or would it turn people off too much to where they wouldn't want to work with me?
Right. I mean, so in the context of the promotion, like you're saying, like the concert promoter aspect, I mean, I've never seen one really using that respect. I mean, like Janet Jackson gets NDAs because she's Janet Jackson and they don't want stuff, like leaking and people, giving out information about her. But generally speaking, it's not common to, even for a venue to just like steal like the place. I mean, honestly, too, there's really nothing there to. I mean, yeah, you lost the business opportunity. I mean, really, in that case, you'd want sort of like a non-circumvention clause, but I've never even seen those. Meaning they're not going to go around you to try and do something. But it just, I mean, that's pretty crappy of them, honestly. I've never really heard of a venue doing that. And regarding your documentary, it's tricky because the idea is that ideas aren't protectable. So if you had an idea for a scene or you had an idea for shooting something, you can't necessarily protect that. Now, if you write a script, if you write a book, if you write something that's, in a tangible form that has, what I call meat on the bones, it has like, a lot of information and descriptions and details, then like you can protect that through copyright law. But it's hard because if you just tell somebody an idea, there's really like, if I say, hey, I'm going to write a story about a guy who goes on a journey through the woods and finds like a dragon. It's like, well, that's pretty vague, right? That's just an idea. And if you went and read a script on that, I can't really come to you and say you stole my idea. It's like, yeah, you stole my idea, but that idea wasn't protectable as it was anyway, because it was just a vague idea. So it's tricky. I mean, it depends on sort of how much you told them. And, if you sort of were able to protect it in the first place, if it was in writing somewhere, but it'd be kind of hard to enforce, honestly. I mean, there are lawsuits where people have tried to do that. I mean, in Hollywood in general, it's like, oh, you stole my idea. That's why a lot of studios are just like, we're not going to take any unsolicited material. We're not going to look at anybody's script because we don't want to get accused later of stealing somebody's work. And usually it's like, yeah, like I said, you have a better case if it's like a script or something that's written down, or a story, rather than just an idea, because like ideas are just all over the place and you can't protect them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but in both cases, it sounds like I don't know if you really have much of a leg to stand on necessarily, unless you had, like I said, a script for the documentary or something.
And one quick note for the NDAs on the promoter side, I've only seen it when it's the artist. So if the artist has something that they want to protect, it's usually on a major scale, but I've seen it also on a smaller scale when it's like magic shows, like when Chris Angel comes and does a show, like everyone at the venue that is backstage has to sign an NDA because you don't want people to know how the props work and how the magic tricks work and everything, because you actually are there setting them up and building them, so you kind of have a little bit of insight to look at those stuff.
Makes sense, yeah.
And any other questions?
So your class is focused mainly on the legal aspect, or just the industry in general?
Industry in general. It's music business. It's a second class, so it's not music business 101. And
okay.
We've gone through your book, and then we've also, like I mentioned earlier, we did like a bunch of digital marketing stuff and focus on how to build like your sales funnels. What I'll do is I'll just go ahead and ask some questions that I have. Anyone else, feel free to chime in anytime. Either use the chat if you have a question, or raise your hand. But I'll go ahead and ask questions to just keep the conversation flowing. So we looked at the Kanye West deal. Have you had a chance to take a look at that deal when he posted it on Twitter last year?
Yeah, I did see it. It's funny because I did soon after it got posted last year. I did a panel at Law School where they kind of asked us about that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have seen them. It's been a little while though, but yeah.
Got it. So when it comes to that deal or deals like that, if you have an artist that you're working with, what are some things that you typically push back on? Because we see all kinds of crazy things on those deals, and especially when it comes to like delaying the release of an album, giving the label the power to delay and delay and delay. What are some things
Right.
that you typically push back on?
Well, I mean, the first thing I tell all my clients before even getting into the terms of the contract, I tell all my clients the same thing. I said, the contract says what it says, but ultimately it's the quality of people you're dealing with,
Right.
right? On the other side, like, does the label have a good reputation? Do they do right by their artists? Do they, how enthusiastic are they about the project? Is there a bidding war going? These are all factors because, like, for example, the label that my brother signed with, they were excellent label, big independent label, but they treated us well. They paid on time. They were very fair to us. But I've definitely heard horror stories from other bands who, signed with labels that weren't, as reputable. And I even had a situation where I represented a independent singer-songwriter, and she signed with the label, and the deal was excellent, really good deal. The numbers were good, everything. They signed her, and nothing happened for 2 years. She just sat around, and nothing happened. So it's one of those things. So that's kind of a threshold question for me. Is like, how do you feel about them? Because I always say it's like dating. If you start to see some red flags in the beginning, don't ignore that. If you see some weird stuff going on and you get a weird vibe, don't ignore that, because it doesn't really get better over time. So that's the first threshold question. The other thing is, I mean, it's always about, I always say the two main questions are how much and how long. How much are they paying you, and how long are you under this contract for? How many options are there? So it's like, is it one option with, so it's one album with 5 options. That's a really long contract potentially. Yep. Typically you'd want to have like one album, but 1 or 2 options. So I try and push back on that, try and get them some more money up front. Also, just make sure there's minimums that the album's going to be produced properly. It's like, well, they'll usually, sometimes if it's a small label, they'll say, okay, we'll determine the recording budget at our sole discretion. But you want to put some minimum and say, okay, you're going to spend at least $25,000 to record that album, or 10,000, or whatever it is, because you don't want them to do it on the cheap and not fund the album properly. Same thing with marketing. If they can put some numbers behind the marketing, then that's better too, because then they can, that at least a certain amount's can get spent to properly push the album. Mm-hmm. So it's just stuff like that, just to make sure that they, and to your point too, because a lot of times there's no requirement that they release an album in the contract. But what you could do is, because the term is by album cycle. So it's like, okay, it'll say something like, okay, this contract starts today, and then we'll continue on initially until 18 months after the release date of the first album. Mm-hmm. But you don't know when the release date is, right? So then if you have the leverage, you try to put an outside date to say, okay, it's either 18 months after release of the album or 24 months after I deliver the album, whichever is shorter. So then at least you're tying it to something. It's like, okay, you accepted the album, you have to release it in the next 2 years, or else this contract is over with. Mm-hmm. So stuff like that. I mean, but most labels aren't going to accept that, honestly. But like, if you have the leverage, you can try and push for that. So those are the things. Like I always say, how much and how long. It's usually the money, and it's usually how long the contract is going to last potentially.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do as an artist? So that's one of the things we notice in the Kanye contract, is that once you deliver the album, right, the label has a certain amount of time until they release it. What happens if they don't release it by that amount of time, then the artist can give them a notice, and it's like another 60 days, and after a notice, and so on and so on. And so like, really, it looked like it was almost like 2 years built in. What if the album is no longer relevant? Like, by the time the label is ready to release it, would they just record a new album, or is it possible that an artist might get shelved? Like, what happens if it's no longer relevant to the times?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I remember I had a friend who worked at a big record label, and she was telling me they spent like $1 million recording this album for this artist, and it got shelved. Mm-hmm. Sorry if you hear my daughter out there, but
that's all good.
The album got shelved, and nothing, and they spent $1 million, and it was just a write-off for the label. I mean, for whatever reason, there's politics involved sometimes, because let's say that they hire a new executive and their priorities are different, and they say, well, I don't want to put out this kind of music, we're going to put out something like this. There's a lot of different factors involved. So, there's a million reasons why an album won't come out. But sometimes it'll just get shelved, and then if anything, just let them out of the deal if it comes to the end, or figure something out.
Mm-hmm. Another story I hear a lot too is when the A&R, the person that signed an artist to a label, when they leave, then sometimes you just get assigned to a new A&R, and they may not be as passionate about the artist because they're not the ones that discover them, or they have other priorities. How likely or how possible is it to negotiate that leaving member clause into a record deal if it's not in there already?
Yeah, I mean,
or the key person clause. Sorry,
key person clause. Yeah, that's usually. I mean, It depends. I mean, like it's all about leverage. If you're a really hot artist who's got 3 record deals, 3 offers on the table, and you can sort of pick and choose. You can say, look, I like this A&R guy over here, so I want to go with this label. But if he leaves, I'm going to leave too. So, you definitely try and tie to them. Labels are sort of reluctant to do that because obviously, like, people can always leave. So,
Right.
it's risky for them in that sense. But, you do try. And then if you have the leverage, you can try and maybe pull it off.
What are some things that create leverage? Like, can you give me or give us any like specific stats or things that people can look for? Like, is it social media followings? Is it views on videos? Is it the amount of revenue they're bringing in? Like, what kinds of things are things that create leverage?
Yeah, I mean, if you're sort of, I mean, all that stuff, social media following, your numbers, if you're doing well, then, then they're going to come and, make you a better deal. Because if you're already making, $1 million a year, it's like, well, you're already doing well. Let's kind of pour gasoline on this fire, and kind of benefit together. Other times it's buzz, sometimes someone just shows up on the scene and they just have a really like one song that hits the right way and they start to just get a following. And then there's like a whole, like just flood of people trying to come and sign them. I mean, this was a mini version of that, but that's kind of what happened with my brother's band when they got signed. I mean, they had this track on MySpace that was getting 50,000 plays per day. And then, like that was back then, especially, that was a lot of plays. And so they were getting emails from like record labels at that point, like big labels too. Like, and it was, we signed with the label we signed with because they stepped up and actually made an offer, and it was a good offer and they were a good label. So yeah, it definitely, it's all about the buzz. And then also if you've kind of shown, because at that point they had done nothing. They had just put a song on MySpace and that was it. They didn't have a touring history. They'd never been on tour, nothing, but they just had the buzz going for them. And, it's like lightning in a bottle. You can't really plan for that. You just have to sort of roll with it when it happens.
Yeah, for sure. I have a couple questions on copyright. Before I go into that, let me check in on the classic. And anybody have a question for Kamal?
Sorry if you can hear my daughter still. She's kind of fussy.
It's all good. Quiet group today. All right, cool. So I'll just keep asking away. But as I said earlier, anybody has a question, just either type it in chat or raise your hand, and I'll definitely call on y'all. Make sure everybody else's questions is answered as well. So when it comes to writing, you hear stories of the friend sitting in the corner of the studio, and all of a sudden, when a song is a hit, then the friend contributed a lyric or a line to the song, and they may end up with to the 5% of ownership of the composition. How do you avoid that? Like, do you have maybe split agreements even with anybody that's in the studio, or is there something you can do as the artist to protect yourself from anybody else that might be in the studio that all of a sudden thinks they contributed to the song?
Yeah, that's tough. That is a tough situation. I mean, hopefully the idea is hopefully that your friend is not going to be that kind of person who's just like, I told you these 2 words you put in the song and then now I want 5%. I mean, hopefully they're not going to do that. But yeah, I think it's just mainly maybe just keep the writing sessions kind of closed, if to the extent possible, just have the people there who are there to write, and that's kind of it. They have writing camps, but you don't bring your friends to the writing camp. You go there with other writers and you guys hammer it out. And I think that's the best way to do it. Now, of course, in the real world, that doesn't, it's not always possible, but I think that's just what it is. I mean, or do some kind of settlement with them, say, okay, look, I'll just pay you off. And if you could just sign this thing saying like, hey, I'll give you $100 right now if you just say, you don't own anything in this, and just get a release from them, if it comes down to it. But it just definitely, I think when it comes to creative process, you need to keep that sort of kind of pure, in the sense that like you're not going to have a bunch of people, like if you have 50 people in there throwing out ideas, it's like, okay, well, this is going to be a problem later. So keep it limited to whoever's there, and then just do it that way. So.
Yeah. And then when 2 people are writing a song, so let's say I have 2 songwriters, one of them is the artist, and so let's say you and I wrote a song together, and I'm the artist, I'm releasing it, and we agreed 50-50 on the composition, right? And then let's say I get picked up by a major label, and this is one of the songs I'm going to record. We pick a producer that's going to create the beat or the melody for it, and now they have contributed to the song as well. Or I guess technically the melody's already created. Let's just say they do some changes to the song and they contribute to it creatively, and now they want a piece of the composition. Would we now redo the split agreement between the 3 of us now, or is your share pretty much protected? And then would I have to just now give up some of my share as the artist or the producer?
You could go either way. Technically speaking, that would be a derivative work because let's
Okay.
say if you and I create a composition with the intent that it's a final composition,
Mhm.
and then somebody adds something else to it later, that's a secondary work, like a derivative work.
Mhm.
So there'd be like a new version, and we have to figure out the splits on that one. A lot of times in split sheets, you'll see something that says like, if we're gonna get diluted, we're gonna get proportionally diluted. So let's say you and I both, own 50-50, but then we're going to give this guy 10%, then we're each going to take 45, in the new version. So because then we're proportionally diluting ourselves. That's a popular approach. Or, sometimes since you're the artist, like let's say you chose a producer and then you kind of did this whole thing and I could say like, look, I don't like this producer. I don't want to, so you're gonna have to pay him out of your share. I'm not
Right.
gonna, touch mine. So it really depends. It's all negotiation in that sense.
Got it. Okay. And then on the sync side, if I saw that when there's a sync fee, there's a fee for the composition and for the master. But on the independent side, when working with sync agencies, when there is a sync fee that comes in, it's just basically just like one lump sum of money. Is that technically broken down that like half of it is for the composition and half of it's for the master, or how does that really work? Because again, like working with sync companies on an independent artist, let's say it's for easy math, let's say there's $100,000 left over after the sync company takes their commission. Is
Right.
that $100,000 technically split between the two?
Yeah, I mean, technically, just as a matter of custom, the sync fee and the master use fee are the same. And they're usually MFN at most favored nations, meaning if someone gets a higher sync fee, then the master fee automatically goes up.
Mhm.
So, it's usually equivalent, and that's how they would usually divide it.
Got it. Okay.
Typically, yeah.
So would it then, if there are other people involved, would then that be the publishing company that negotiates what the fee is, or does the label have a say in that as well?
Well, usually what happens is that you have a two-sided negotiation going on, but there's language in each contract that says if any, like, if the public, like, so on the record label side, it'll say like, okay, if the publisher gets a higher fee, then our fee is automatically adjusted to match that. So let's say on the master side, we quoted $50,000 for the master use license, but then the publisher ends up getting $75,000. In our master use agreement, it's going to say, well, whatever the publisher gets, we're going to get bumped up to that as well. So then it's automatically to bump it up to 75 for us as well. So that's usually how it goes. You're going to have like what's called most favored nations, where it just automatically adjusts, and whoever gets the highest rate, that's the rate for both.
Got it. Okay. So in the publishing company, they're probably aware of that. And if they're negotiating with whatever company for a commercial, and let's say the company offers X amount, they're just going to say, okay, well, this is going to be the same amount for the master. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, basically, because they're tied together usually. Even though they're separate agreements, they're tied together for the money aspect. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. And then you also mentioned for when it comes to the publishing thing, if you're releasing music independently, of starting a separate publishing company that the music is registered under, would that be would you have two LLCs or two sole proprietorships? Like one is for the artist and one is that owns the music? Like how does that work?
I mean, realistically, in the very beginning, when you're releasing your own stuff, you're just going to have one company that you're going to own everything under. So you're going to own your masters and your compositions in the same company.
Okay.
When you start to get successful, and you want to probably spin off your publishing into a separate company, and then just all your publishing will be done through that separate LLC, and then you'd keep your main LLC as your like label / production company or whatever to own your recordings. So that's the best way to do it. I mean,
And what's the best way to protect yourself as an artist from any potential lawsuits? I know the LLC is one layer of protection, but what other things are there that you can protect yourself so people can't come after your personal assets?
Well, I'm a big proponent of like, if you're going to go on tour, get tour insurance. It's not that expensive, honestly. I used to manage a hip hop violinist, and we would go on gigs, and sometimes we'd be required to have insurance just because if anybody got injured for whatever reason, and it'd be like $1 million of coverage, but it was like $50. And I'm like, dude, it's like totally worth it to get this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're going to go on the road, definitely get tour insurance, because you never know, anything can happen. If someone could slip and fall at your show, you could go stage diving and knock somebody's teeth out. Like it could, stuff happens, right? And so you want to have that insurance. So that's definitely touring is risky too. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. In terms of releasing material, I don't really see this often, but you could also get like what's called E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance. Like when when someone releases a movie, for example, they have to get E&O insurance just in case someone like a lawsuit pops up and says, "Oh, you stole my script," or whatever, or like whatever it is, or you based this movie on my book that I wrote and I didn't give you permission. I don't really see that happening much in the music industry in terms of people getting E&O insurance, but I think it's not a bad idea. Honestly, if you're going to start a record label, get some E&O insurance so that if you are putting out music and you get sued for it, at least you have some coverage there.
Mm-hmm. And then starting an LLC, I know you mentioned a book in California. It's around $800 a year, which is crazy. In Florida, it's $125 a year. Would you be quicker to recommend artists starting an LLC if it were more affordable, like it is in Florida? Or at what point should someone start an LLC?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, if it's affordable in your state, that you can start it there and just have it hold all your assets, all your compositions and your recordings. California is tricky because like there's a lot of artists who live out here and they're doing business out here, so it just makes sense to form LLC here. And even if you form it in a different state, if you're doing business in California, a lot of times they'll require you to register here anyway, and you have to pay the $800 regardless.
Oh, really?
But so they'll get you definitely. So I think that the best time to form an LLC is when you really honestly have money coming in, or at least it looks like something's going to happen. Like you're going to sign a record deal, you're going to go on tour, you're going to, really have something going on. If it's kind of a hobby that you're doing and kind of writing songs here and there, I mean, realistically, I don't know if you really need an LLC right up front.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more about it's basically you're treating it like a real business, and you actually have money, you have expenses, and you have income, and you're trying to track everything properly for tax purposes. But I always recommend talking to a CPA as well, because they'll kind of be able to guide you and say, look, this is a good time to start your LLC because you have all this money coming in. So we want to sort of run it through your company rather than you personally. So, that's probably, but there's really no magic line. It's just a matter of the timing really, and if what you're doing is really turning into a business rather than just a hobby that you're doing on the weekends.
Yeah. And since you mentioned if you're doing business in California, I'd like to have you, like for you to have an LLC in California. If you're based in a different state and let's say you're on tour in California and something happens, and let's say you have tour insurance, but you also have an LLC in a different state, does that still protect you from someone going after your personal assets if you have an LLC in a different state?
It helps. Honestly, the insurance will do a better job of that than
Oh, really?
the,
Okay.
yeah, because that's what it's there for, right? Like, I mean, because LLCs, and the other thing is too, you have to treat your company like a real company. You can't just treat it like your own personal piggy bank.
Yeah.
Because what they'll do is they'll go to trial and say, look, you didn't treat your company as a proper company. You're just treated it as a piggy bank, so you don't get the protection of the company. And then you get what's called piercing the corporate veil. You can just kind of then it falls away, and then you're personally liable. So there's formalities you have to kind of keep up with to show that you're treating it like a separate company for real, and then but like I said, the insurance is really what's going to protect you. For example, as a lawyer in California, you can't form a law firm in California that's an entity and protect yourself from liability. That's how the law is out here.
Mm-hmm.
So you have professional corporations, they have LLPs, limited liability partnerships for law firms here, but that doesn't protect you from liability. You as a lawyer are always on the hook. So that's why you have insurance. So I have malpractice insurance to protect me from that. So really what's going to protect you is the insurance, ultimately.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. Before I switch topics again, just want to check in on the room again. Anybody have any questions?
They might find this horribly boring. I don't know.
What do people need to know about the MLC? I think when we talked the last time, the MLC wasn't really a big thing yet, the Mechanical Licensing Collective. What is it that people need to know about it?
Well, so basically the MLC, they're going to collect mechanical royalties on streaming, interactive streaming, like on-demand streaming, which is basically Spotify, Apple Music, and so forth. So as a songwriter, to get paid, people used to go through Harry Fox and Music Reports, but the MLC is sort of like a quasi-governmental agency that's authorized to collect and distribute mechanical royalties. So you're going to want to make sure that you're properly registered with the MLC and so that you can collect your royalties. I don't do that personally. I actually have a licensing, what's called an A&R admin person, or a label services person who I work with. And I just usually refer it to her, and she goes out there and will make sure everything is properly registered with, various organizations.
Sure. But if you're an independent artist and you don't maybe have the luxury to have someone that's like a label services person, should independent artists definitely sign up with the MLC?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially in songwriting. I mean, you definitely want to make sure you collect those. It's like signing up with ASCAP or BMI. You just want to make sure that you're in the system so that you're properly getting your royalties for sure. So because ASCAP and BMI will collect on the performance side, and then the MLC collects on the mechanical side. So you just want to make sure that you're getting everything you deserve.
Yeah, and you said interactive streaming. So if you are signed up, let's say with BMI, and then you also sign up with the MLC, you still need to sign up for Sound Exchange, right? And just I guess give everyone a little bit of a an overview what Sound Exchange is and how that's different from the MLC.
Yeah, so Sound Exchange is a different thing altogether. So Sound Exchange is all about the digital broad transmission, non-interactive transmission of recordings. So the MLC, BMI, ASCAP, and the PROs, they collect on the composition side for you as a songwriter. So if you're writing songs, they're going to collect your royalties, over there. Sound Exchange is completely different. They collect just for recordings, broadcast of recordings, and there's a limited, basically there's a lot more ways to make money with a composition than there is a recording, because like for example when a track is played on the radio, the songwriters get paid for that, whereas the owner of the master recording doesn't get paid for that. So it's very limited. So Sound Exchange will collect on non-interactive digital streaming of recordings. That's like Pandora, iHeartRadio, stuff like that. Non-interactive because you can't choose what comes next. It's like listening to the radio. So if you're a recording artist who's releasing your own material, you have your own label, you're going to want to make sure everything is registered with Sound Exchange so you can get those, those streaming royalties from the master side as well.
Got it. Okay, cool. I see.
And it's tricky too because it's a hard concept because people sort of conflate everything where it's like you have to separate the songwriting income versus the master income.
Yeah. So just to summarize, so everybody should sign up with whatever PRO they choose. They should sign up with Sound Exchange and they should sign up with MLC if they're independent, if they don't have someone collecting any of that money for them. Got it. Okay, cool. Makes sense.
Correct. Those are the main ones that are gonna get you paid. Yeah.
And then publishing admin deals. At what point should someone look for one of those? Like if you were independent, you're signing up through TuneCore or CD Baby, they offer those services.
Right.
Does it make sense? Is it better just to go through them when you're first starting out, or at what point does it make sense to take that away, go away from CD Baby, TuneCore, and find a publishing admin person?
Well, it really depends on again, if you have money coming in, if you really have like something, it's like when you need a manager. It's like you need a manager when you have something to manage, and it's the same thing too. If your catalog is starting to really take off and make money, you're going to probably need an administrator to kind of track all the income and make sure you're getting paid properly. Like Janet, for example, she has a publishing admin person because she controls her publishing. She has an admin person whose job is to kind of oversee her catalog and license it out. But she makes a lot of money from her compositions, right? So it's a matter of when is there somebody needed in that role? And if you start to notice that the checks are starting to kind of bump up, like, oh wow, I'm actually making good money here, let me get an admin person to keep an eye on everything, and maybe even a good admin person to try and help you get some more opportunities too. Maybe they'll send it out for different pitches and stuff. So it really depends, but that's basically when you need one. It's like when things start to really happen. A lot of the music industry is like you need it when you need it because money's coming in.
Yeah.
And that's what
for sure. I see Jade joined us as well. She usually always has really great questions. Not to put you on the spot, Jade, but you have any questions for Kamal? Any you want to ask? You're shy today.
It's cool. Now during my because I teach the music publishing class at Southwestern Law School, and like I said it's on Wednesday nights, and like sometimes I'm like it's just me talking the whole time. Like, you guys have any questions? Or I'm going to assume that you're understanding all this, but it's all good. No, I know how it is. Not everybody wants to speak up.
Usually this group's really good, but no pressure. But I guess let's go to artist management agreements real quick. What are some things artists should look for in an artist management agreement, and how often do you still see that artist managers still do agreements? And if they typically don't, what would be recommendations then?
So, I mean, technically speaking, even if you have a handshake deal, it's enforceable in California. I mean, you can just, as long as you can prove it up. I mean, but obviously as a lawyer, I'm like, you get everything in writing. The going rate in the music industry right now is 20%. Managers are charging 20% for their services. One thing you should look out for is that under California law, managers are not allowed to charge upfront fees for their services. So you have to watch out for that. Now that's different from like they can give you like if they're providing an actual service fee. Let's say they're doing a photo shoot for you, or they're arranging like you can pay them for that stuff, for actual services. But for management services, you're not really supposed to be taking upfront fees, and that there's actually people can get in trouble for that. So that's one thing to look out for.
What are some things that artists should try to deduct from those commissions?
Well, one thing in my definition that I use, I say, okay, well, sound and lights, meaning like if you're going to go on tour and you have to pay for sound and lights and like a crew and tour expenses, travel, like, well, okay, let's take that off the top before you commission what's left. Also too, if you're getting money that's intended specifically for recording costs,
Mhm.
that's not an advance in your pocket, you should exclude that because the recording costs, those are meant to be spent on recording, not meant to be, money to the artist. So stuff like that, stuff that you really isn't your money, basically. Money, it's money that's intended for other purposes. Or yeah, just like, just expenses off the top. When I used to manage my violinist, especially, he would always like, because he has to fly to the gig, he has to pay for car rental and hotel. We'd always deduct that off the top before I took my commission because I think that's just fair, honestly.
Mhm, yeah. And what about managers getting reimbursed for expenses? Because I see that in old school contracts a lot, where
Mhm.
managers like expense travel to meet with people or meetings, whatever, or going to conferences. And I'm of the philosophy, and maybe you can add what your thoughts are. But I'm of the philosophy as a manager, it's your responsibility to have a network and build relationships. So, it should be your responsibility. If I'm based in Orlando, it should be my responsibility to go to Nashville, New York, LA regularly to meet with people and network with people and not pass that off to the artist. Do you still see that as something that's happening a lot, or what are kind of guess your suggestions on artists or managers taking getting reimbursements for expenses?
I think reimbursements are pretty typical, but I always put caps on them. So, for example, any single expense over $100 or group of expenses in a month that's over $300, like aggregate expenses in a month, requires artist permission ahead of time.
Mhm.
So you're not just running up the tab, right? So
Sure.
obviously, if you're going to travel to New York or something, it has to be for a good reason. Like, okay, let's fly to New York because we have to negotiate this record deal. Yeah, that makes sense. But if I'm just sending you to New York just to generally network, that's not really my job, as the artist. I'm not paying for that. So you have to I always put caps on it just to prevent issues like that, because I mean, there are some unscrupulous managers out there who just keep on charging and charging and charging, and it's like, yeah, you don't want to do that. So it's all about just kind of having enforceable caps. Also too, I always put in the contract that says language that says before you can get reimbursed, you have to provide like documentation of the expenses, so it's not just like made up, like, because the artist is not covering the manager's overhead or anything. Like, it's like they got to cover like real expensive. And I mean, there are legitimate times when the manager is incurring expenses. Like, for example, if the manager pays for a photo shoot for the artist, that's really the artist's responsibility to pay for that. So they should get reimbursed for that. So it's and again, this goes back to what I said earlier. Just like with the signing with the record label, you have to look at who you're dealing with and if you can trust them. If are they going to be sort of shady, or are they going to actually be um, like more straight up with you. So personal manager relationship is very intimate. Like, it's like that's why it's usually a family member, because you can trust those people implicitly. Generally speaking, that's why I was my brother's manager, because he just trusted me because I've known him his entire life. And you have to be able to really kind of trust them with everything. So in all your business. So yeah.
For sure, yeah. And Jade has a couple questions in the chat, so let me read those out. The first one is,
Sure.
what are black box royalties, and how can independent artists ensure that they are collecting all their due revenue?
So the black box basically is royalties that are unclaimed. And to your point earlier, we were talking about like the MLC and like just these. Basically, there's money that's generated from compositions, but they're not sure where they're supposed to go, so they get stuck into this so-called black box until they're claimed. The thing is, they sit there for only like 2 or 3 years, and then they're distributed just in other ways, and they go away. So that's why I said, it's really important to make sure that all your compositions and recordings are properly registered. They have the ISRC codes to make sure they can be tracked through metadata. And because, like, you might just be missing out on a lot of potential income. So that's why you need like a good administrator or a label services person or A&R admin to make sure that all that stuff is properly, done.
For sure. And then Jade has another question. How should an artist prepare for a consultation with an attorney? What information should they gather and provide?
This is going to sound like a shameless plug, but honestly, they should read my book first because it's a better conversation. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that people have called me, and like they're lacking a baseline of information. It's hard to have a conversation with them because they just don't understand certain things. And just try and at least understand the basics. But if you're taking this class, especially, you're going to be in a much better position because you'll understand copyright and certain contracts. So that's helpful. But also to kind of understand what you want to get out of the conversation. I mean, understand, like, you want to get a sense for who the attorney is. I mean, not all attorneys are the same. I'm definitely very different than some other attorneys out there. One thing that a lot of clients who come to me have said, it's like, oh, my last lawyer made me feel like an idiot. He talked down to me, and I'm like, well, I don't do that. And maybe it's because I was artist manager. I'm used to dealing with creative people, and I'm not egotistical. I'm very just straight up and just explain things in a normal, plain English sort of way that people like me. And one thing I always tell that I notice, a lot of my clients, they don't just want a lawyer, they want a friend who happens to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I kind of fall in that sort of zone where, like, I actually genuinely like talking to people, but I don't like to talk over their heads, because, like, what's the value there for them? So I think evaluating your attorney, kind of going in and thinking about, like, what kind of attorney do you need? Do you want somebody to really explain things to you? Do you not care about that? You just want to get the deal done? It's knowing what you're looking for is important too.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, but I guess I'll change the question a little bit up. But a lot of artists sometimes will just sign a bad deal because they may have the perception of they can't really afford an attorney. And I know you mentioned that some label deals will include the fee for an attorney, but say it's an independent label and that fee is not added in, and for some reason there's this perception that attorneys are just expensive, and I'm just going to read it myself, maybe ask a friend, maybe ask a manager. I'm just going to decide on my own. I guess what are the fees, like, and not necessarily the exact amount, but like, what are the different types of deals? Like, I know some attorneys will work under a flat fee. There's potential for a retainer. There's a potential of attorney working for a percentage. Like, when does each scenario appropriate for a specific artist? And what about if an artist just can't afford the whole flat fee thing?
I have a lot of independent clients who I work with who, they can't afford a whole lot. So I'll try and keep the pricing friendly for them. It depends. So I'll look at the contract, like, okay, they're getting paid this much, I'll try and build it in, like you said, to the contract, or I'll say, okay, I'll charge you this much because you're making this much of it. If it's like a really, like, they're not making much out of the contract at all, I'd say, okay, well, I'll charge you a few $100 to look at it, just to kind of tell you my thoughts. It really depends on the situation. So I'm trying to keep it really, at least affordable and pricing friendly. As for percentages, I don't do percentages a whole lot, honestly. Some people, it's just, whenever I've gotten into the percentage situation, it turned into such a headache, because then unfortunately they feel like they can call you all the time, and it's like, look, I have other clients to work, do work for, and it's just like, it gets dragged out way too long. So a lot of times I'll do a combination of, like, a reduced hourly fee and a smaller percentage, just to kind of have, like, okay, at least there's some, money coming in here to make it more worth it. Unfortunately, I had a client recently who, like, she had this one deal on the table for, like, one song and one master recording she did, and that thing dragged out for weeks, and it was just all these calls and talking and this and that, and I'm like, this is not that serious. Like, why is this turning into what this is? Because it was a percentage deal, and I kind of got talked into it by a co-counsel who I work with. And we ended up just not working. I said, look, this is just not worth it for us anymore. And I'm sorry. Like, and it's not, I hate to do that, because it's not, I don't like to be that kind of person, but I have other clients I have to kind of, service. And, like, I can't just spend all this time on one. Even Janet Jackson, I mean, she takes up a good chunk of time, but it's not like it takes up all day long every day, so you have to be sort of mindful of that. So short answer is, like, yeah, I always try and work with them and the fees and, like, whatever the deal itself is, and try and make it friendly for them. I've definitely given discounts for people who really can't afford it, because I want to help protect them. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, and they're like, okay, well, this is just too much money, I'll do it on my own. And I'm like, okay, well, hopefully, good luck, read my book first, hopefully, and it'll help you. But so we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of a vague answer, but it's kind of the truth.
Yeah, for sure. That's good. And then you also mentioned free consultation. So if someone has a deal on the table, right, and they're trying to figure out what attorney is the best attorney for them. I once had a client, we went to Nashville, and we literally met with a bunch of attorneys. We almost like, it was an interview or get to know each other. And there's no fee for that. And there was an entertainment attorney I reached out to in Florida once, and it was a different client, and they wanted to charge a fee just even have a conversation. Right. I don't know. And I was like, I wonder if that's just like a Florida thing. And I was like, so mad, just at all entertainment attorneys in Florida. But is it typical in, like, New York, LA, Nashville, and if you have a deal, to be able to meet with a few different attorneys to figure out what is the best fit for you without having to charge or pay for a consulting fee for each of them?
Yeah, most attorneys that I know will just do a free initial consultation. It's not really an issue. I mean, it's going to be like 20 minutes. It's not going to be super long, or 15, 20 minutes. But they'll talk. I mean, it's business development. I think it's free. I mean, maybe if you're sort of super like high level and you're working on like extremely high level deals and you don't have the time, it's like, well, I need some money. I mean, yeah, I guess you could do that, but if you're a newer artist, I don't know, like maybe it's just not worth it to you. I mean, there's a lot of great attorneys out there who will talk to you for at least a free initial consultation before they take you on. I mean, I'll, not to say I'm a great attorney, but I'll do it, like, and I've been in this business for like 15 years. So I think it's just good business to do it that way.
Yeah,
my
for sure.
opinion.
I completely agree. And is it okay for, let's say, anybody in this class? So it's not just people who are here now, but everyone has to write a discussion board on this conversation. So I'm gonna post it on Canvas afterwards, so everyone will see it. But if everyone actually had something legit, like they have a management agreement or a record deal that's in this class, is it okay for them to reach out to you?
Oh, please. Yeah, definitely. Shoot me an email. And I mean, honestly, I'll talk to anybody. I definitely, I'm not the kind of person, I think in the industry, especially if you're going to make it and have longevity, I think you learn to sort of not, get too sort of high on yourself. Like I think there's some people out there who definitely have sort of an ego. And my saying is like, the moment you start to think you're a big deal is the moment you start to destroy yourself. Because I think it's not good policy to go around thinking that you're better than anybody else. I mean, like I said, it took me years to get Janet Jackson as a client, but it doesn't matter. I'll still take those small indie deals because I love doing that stuff. So it doesn't, no matter what level I get to, I'm never gonna, turn into some kind of egotistical jerk. I'll always talk to anybody who has an issue who they need help with, if they need help with.
Awesome, love that. And then before I ask you just for some final words of wisdom or a message or a message of encouragement for everyone, does anybody else have another question, a final question for Kamal?
I'll just say thanks, Kamal, for taking the time to talk to us. We normally have our class at a different time, so we usually have more people and it's more lively discussion. But I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, it was tricky because I know I'm on the West Coast, so I know it's the timing was a thing. But yeah, hopefully a lot of people will see this and get something out of it. I know you're recording it, so and as you said, the whole class is eventually going to watch it. So yeah, hopefully there's some good information here. It wasn't just me babbling for no reason.
No, this was great. Thanks so much for
add something too.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, hey. I don't know how to do the hand raising thing. Sorry, but
it's all good.
So I wanted to do video and audio recording of an event at a venue, but I want to avoid any, whether my hopes is to get it syndicated on PBS or whatever, and also do like a DVD sale or a download.
Okay.
What are some ways I could prevent, a certain song from not being able to be put on the DVD, or I want the whole thing to be able to, of course, some will have to be edited out because of time. But for example, like, Beavis and Butthead, all DVD releases exclude the music video segments.
Right.
Or, Adventures of Pete and Pete, all of season 3, there's some legal obstacles preventing that season 3 from being released. You kind of get what I'm trying to say? Like,
yeah, definitely. I mean, so basically, if you're going to record live performances of compositions, you're definitely going to need to take like, you're going to get sync licenses for that from the compositions. You're going to have to go to the music publishers that own the composition to get a sync license for that in order to put it out. You're also, if the band is signed to a record label, you're going to need a waiver from that record label too, because technically speaking, whatever the band records, whether just audio only or audio visual, technically during the term of the contract, that automatically belongs to the record label. So you need a waiver from that label to kind of put that music out and put out the video with them playing the music. So you're going to need a couple of licenses there in order to actually, sell it to PBS or put it out or, sell it in any way. Those are the main things: the sync license on the composition side, and then label waiver on the band side from the record label.
Okay, and would the waiver have a timeline? Like I could only sell DVD or do the downloads for 2 years, or could I do like a lifetime thing?
It really depends. I mean, yeah, you could definitely talk to the label and see sort of, you tell them what you're trying to do, and then you kind of craft the license from there. They may want a cut of whatever you make from it. So it's like, okay, well, you're selling these DVDs, we want a commission on, royalty on that. Or they might just do it as like, hey, like this is good promotion for us. So, just give us credit and say, such and such artist appears courtesy of this record label in the credits. So, it really depends on sort of how cooperative the label wants to be. If you kind of know somebody over the label, it's going to be helpful because obviously they'll know you and they'll trust you. And like, they're pretty like, a lot of labels especially are very, justifiably so, they're very protective of their artists and trying to make sure that, the image is protected. And if a project is put out properly and not just sort of, on the cheap and looks kind of wonky, so you're gonna want to basically just show them that it's going to be a good release and not going to really tarnish the band in any way.
Yeah.
Okay, one last thing. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to cut in because I know Kamal only had an hour.
Oh, I'm sorry.
How are you on time, Kamal?
I can answer one more question. I mean, then I got to go. Yeah.
I did see Philip join in. Chris, if you have any questions, if you want to, feel free to send them to me directly. Maybe I try to help you out too. But Philip usually always has really good questions and thoughts to add. Just want to see if Philip had a question for Kamal.
I don't have a question right now, but just keep going. Thank you very much for calling me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we recorded a session, so I'll post it on Canvas. Sorry that we missed it. But Kamal, you have any last words of wisdom or encouragement for everyone here?
I think.
Oh. Sorry, actually, I muted you, Kamal. I meant to meet Philip.
Yeah. One thing I always tell people is like the music industry is it's all about relationships. It's like 90% relationships, honestly. And it's all about cultivating healthy, good relationships with people who you can sort of rely on. And that's what I've just kind of been trying to do for the last, since I started. I mean, just form good relationships. And as I've told people before, like Janet Jackson could have any lawyer she wants in LA, but her manager really liked me and we get along, and I'm just like a guy with a solo practice, and I like to think I do a good job too. So it's just about, kind of building your reputation. And I think that, to my point earlier on like, don't let the ego overtake you in any way. And then definitely that'll be to your benefit. I've seen so many people sort of destroy their own careers before they even really started because they just didn't know how to take it easy, and not get a big head. And that's the main thing. That's the main takeaway. And just keep on plugging away because, eventually something's going to break in your favor.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you have a very important birthday to celebrate or to celebrate again. So congrats on that. And thanks also for all the info you shared today, and then for your book for laying it out so easily to read and so easily to navigate. It definitely feels like almost like a consultation, like where it's like, what if this happens? And you kind of answer that question. So I really love how you laid it out, and also notice you kind of laid it out almost like a contract where it's like A and then section 1 and 2. Well, that's something I picked up, but
for easy reference. Yeah, for easy reference. That's the lawyer in me for sure. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to follow up with me. I mean, Chris has my email address, and if anybody has any direct questions, please. And I'm also on LinkedIn, so can add me on there as well.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much. Have an awesome day, and looking forward to connecting again soon.
Okay, thanks. Really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good day, guys.
You too. And then for everyone else that's here, I'll stay on if you guys want to have any questions for me or want to chat about anything.
I just want to say I got caught up on stuff at work, so that was the quickest that I could connect. But I'll watch the whole session.
Oh, cool. You watched it? Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, if you have any questions afterwards, just hit me up. Yeah. Thanks for coming in for a couple seconds.
When do you think the next workshop will be? Will be next month sometime?
I'll send you all the info. Probably either this week or next week.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
I have a quick question. Do you have any classes being offered for the summer?
No. So most of the program, I don't think most of the programs offered in the summer. I'm not sure. Are there any summer classes that you're seeing?
No, I'm just asking before looking. I don't. Yeah, I'm not. Or
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have anything in the summer. There is a artist management course that I have in the fall, and then concert touring. Have you taken either one of those yet?
I'll sign up for both.
Okay, awesome, cool. And then in the summer, if you're interested on kind of the promoter venue side, I have like a little academy that I have as well. I'm gonna do a course over the summer. I'll be happy to send you the info on that, and if you want to learn more on the promoter touring side. Awesome, cool. Thanks, Philip. Anybody else? Any other questions? Or else I'm gonna stop this and we'll sign out.
Oh, I have one thing. Can I ask like a promoter question?
Yeah. I guess let's just wait for everyone else to sign out, and then we can stick on and chat. Let me stop the recording too. So thanks everyone that joined live and everyone watching on the recording. Feel free to hit me up if you have any questions, or if you have any for Kamal, send me info on that, and feel free to reach out.